Welcome everyone to our Packers News post-game live chat alongside Ryan Wood. I am Olivia Reiner. When the Packers lose, and they don't lose very often, they like to lose pretty hard. Under head coach Matt LaFleur, the Packers have only lost 5 times, 4 of them blowout losses, including tonight's loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 38-10. We'll discuss quarterback Aaron Rodgers' historically bad night, plus we'll also touch on the Packers' defense. They didn't fare much better either. Before we get into that, I want to remind you, as always, you can be a part of our conversation today. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question, leave us a comment. Feel free to vent a little bit if you want to. I know how you people are out there. You've got a lot on your mind. We want to hear from you, and we'll discuss some of your thoughts towards the end of our show today. It was a night of a lot of first time in a long times for quarterback Aaron Rodgers. In the second quarter, he threw a pick six, the third of his career. He doesn't do it very often, and immediately on the next drive, he threw an interception. What made Aaron Rodgers so injury prone tonight?
You know, I think 2020 might have had something to do with it. 2020, they're playing in Tampa Bay, which is a house of horrors for Aaron Rodgers. Of course this was going to happen, right? We should have seen it coming. His first time since 2017, the final game of 2017, that he had interceptions on consecutive drives. That one, you might remember at the Carolina Panthers, was the game that he came back from the broken collarbone, so he hadn't played in a while. This doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. His worst passer rating in a game since late in the 2014 season at Buffalo, when he was 35 tonight, was 34 then. The good news about that, Olivia, he did end up being MVP that year. And frankly, in a lot of ways, this game reminds me of that game. Being there, if you go back to that 14 game in Buffalo, that was, everyone knew at the time, that game was kind of it was playoff implications, similar to this game might be with the Bucs. It was potentially for home field. The offense had been clicking so well going into that game. Aaron Rodgers was having an MVP season. Everyone knew it by then. And it just made no sense. It was one of those, where did this come from? That doesn't – you didn't see it coming. Similar to Aaron Rodgers has been almost flawless basically through 4 games. MVP front runner at the quarter pole of the season. No one saw this coming. Maybe we should have, 2020 Tampa Bay. No one saw this coming. But – it's one of those. I think there's a reason why Aaron Rodgers talking after the game, Olivia, that it's an anomaly. He believes that this is not a trend. It's one of those that you don't throw it away because you got to look at what happened wrong, but at the same time, you don't make too much. The real problem for this team isn't what happened today. It's if they cannot rebound from this, and along that line, it's good for them that they have Houston next.
There's so many bad superlatives out of tonight's game for Aaron Rodgers. 35.4 passer rating, his second lowest of his career. He took 4 sacks. Coming into tonight's game, he only had 3 all seasons. Plus, he also took 12 quarterback hits. He hasn't faced that much pressure at all this season. Why was the Bucs pass rush so much stronger than Rodgers' protection tonight?
Well, losing David Bakhtiari early in the third quarter certainly didn't help. Not having a just not having a backup left tackle doesn't help. Rick Wagner's not a left tackle. He's a right tackle. So to put Rick Wagner at left tackle you're not putting a left tackle on the field. They have no left tackle behind David Bakhtiari. Related to the point, they really need him to be healthy soon. Aaron Rodgers said he checked in with Bakhtiari after the game and that he seemed like he was in good spirits with that chest injury, but obviously didn't know the severity of the injury. So the Packers really need him to be – he's Rodgers and then probably David Bakhtiari, the player that they cannot afford to lose. They don't have a left tackle. But ultimately, Rodgers said it. He gave Todd Bowles his credit, his respect after the game. Todd Bowles won this game. His scheme, his blitz won this game up front with those players, and they were too much for this offensive line. It's going to be a humbling experience for this offensive line that was very good through 4 games to watch the film, see what happened. Bottom line, that Bucs defensive front's really good. You saw last year when they went up against a really good defensive front in San Francisco. They didn't get the better of that matchup either. When they've gone up against good defensive fronts with Matt LaFleur, they've struggled, and this is something they're going to have to figure out because it's probably not the last time this season that they're going to go up against a good defensive front.
Aaron Rodgers and his pick six shifted the momentum for the Packers, not in a good way. However, the defense didn't do much to help out. The Bucs scored 38 unanswered points. 12 of them came from running back Ronald Jones. The defense gave up 158 yards on the ground total. Even with defensive lineman Kenny Clark's return tonight, why did the Packers' run defense struggle so much?
It's just been the way it's gone. I don't know if there's anything new or revelatory to say other than they're just not good against the run. And this isn't, the difference to me is not the run defense. It's the lack of big plays. This defense made a living on big plays last year, sacks, turnovers, a lot of times in the red zone. I mean, there's a reason why they were so good in the red zone last year. They made big plays in the red zone last year. This year, the big plays just aren't there. And considering how little through the first 5 games now the Packers offense has asked the defense to actually be a contributor and help along, considering that it's alarming how little they've really been able to do that. They had a good game against the Falcons, but otherwise they struggled. And this is something they're going to have to figure out, because if the lessons of the past taught anything, it's that there's going to come a point in time when this offense is going to need the defense to do its part. I'm thinking of 2011. The last time the Packers had an offense like this, that was an atrocious defense in 2011. It was a great record-setting offense in 2011. You knew at some point the offense, it happens to everybody. They're going to have that day where they don't have it. You got to have a defense, even with a great offense like this, that can hold the water in that day, and this defense hasn't held the water yet. This is something that they're going to have to fix, because it's probably not going to be the last time this year that they're going to need the defense to contribute. And when that time comes, they're going to need it to happen.
The Packers defense made tight end Rob Gronkowski look about 10 years younger tonight. Rob Gronkowski had 5 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown. His longest was a 31-yard reception. This was kind of reminiscent of 2019 Packers when they let tight end Darren Waller and the Raiders carve them up, tight end George Kittle and the San Francisco 49ers as well. Why can't the Packers cover big tight ends, Ryan?
Well, it starts with coverage on the second level, or the lack thereof. And they didn't have that with Blake Martinez the past few years. They still don't have that. I think Christian Kirksey was the guy who was meant to come in and provide that. He's on IR. So that's what you're going to get. You're right. It's Rob Gronkowski has been Rob Gronkowski through the first month of the season. Tonight he was Gronk, and that was the difference. The Packers made him Gronk, though. I mean, the most yards he had all season in a game was 52. He had a dozen catches for 140 yards coming in on the season, coming into today. It was a very different story. And you look at it, I mean, they knew that they had to get creative with their pass coverage because Kevin King wasn't going to play, and so they put Jair Alexander on Mike Evans. That's 7 inches of height difference there. That should be a mismatch for Mike Evans, right? Well, Mike Evans had 1 catch for 10 yards. Jair Alexander did the job against Mike Evans. Tom Brady, for all the talk about Rodgers Brady this week, it's going to get lost in how poorly Rodgers played, but Brady didn't do much. He had a quiet night. You look at the stat line, it was Ronald Jones and it was Gronk in the pass game, and that's an issue that they've got to figure out, and maybe it's just a matter of when Christian Kirksey comes back, but someone's got to learn how to cover tight ends on this defense.
Aaron Rodgers said the team looked lethargic coming into tonight's game. Head coach Matt LaFleur said the team didn't practice well in practice leading up to today's game. The Packers have lost all 4 games immediately after the bye over the last 4 seasons. Ryan, is this just a fluke? How should Packers fans look at this loss tonight?
The bye week thing is just weird. I mean, that's not the way it's supposed to be, and it's been that way. I think that this was a game in which you had some really stunning, shocking things happen, the pick six being the primary culprit. And this is a team that just had a momentary lapse where they forgot how to execute. And Aaron Rodgers said that they didn't feel like he was in that much rhythm of the offense even before the pick six, even though they had the 10-0 lead. He thought that the offense, a lot of that was off schedule and that they weren't really in rhythm. It's maybe not as simple as saying the pick six shocked them into forgetting how to execute, But it sure seemed like that. I mean, they had a 10-0 lead. They were dominating time of possession. They were getting chunk plays in the passing game. They were converting third and longs, which a year ago, Olivia, they had no chance to convert a third and long, and they were doing that in succession, right? And then the most shocking thing that could happen to this team happened, the pick six, the thing that does not happen. And they disintegrated. They fell apart. And they're going to have to get tougher when it comes to handling adversity. It's the first real taste they had this year, and they did not handle it well. Aaron Rodgers said that he felt like it's a family show, so I'll clean it up, that the team needed a kick in the booty, and they got one. We'll see how they respond to it.
Let's kick it over to Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us tonight. If you haven't gotten a question in yet, don't worry, it's not too late. We're going to get to them right now. Ed, we'll start with you. Ed asks, or he points out, I should say, the lack of talent at certain positions is exposed when the Packers play a playoff caliber team, wide receiver and run defense specifically. And then Ed, of course, mocks the Packers draft selections. Good thing the Packers drafted a third-string quarterback and a second-string practice squad players. Ryan, how much was this loss attributed to personnel versus execution tonight?
Yeah, Ed, the lack of talent at receiver, it was the same right now as it was the first 4 games. The only difference is that they didn't play the Bucs, right? And that's why after 4 games, with all the guffawing of, hey, look at what they're doing, this is so good, and for good reason. What they were doing, they dominated 4 teams. It was not. I mean, they really just ran over this offense ran over 4 defenses to start the season. But at some point, you knew they were going to face a good defense, and at that point, that's why I said it was too early to feel like that not drafting a receiver is going to come back and hurt them. The reality is that production-wise, this offense is very similar to 2011. If you look at the fact that through 4 games, the first 4 games, their yards and points were almost identical. They do it so differently. This offense is built on the depth of the backfield. It's not as explosive as that 2011 offense that went 5 deep at receiver and had Jermichael Finley, and everywhere Aaron Rodgers was throwing, he was throwing to a stud. Not the same. And against good defenses, I thought early in the season you'd have to wonder what was it going to look like. Tonight, it was not that lack of explosion in the passing game. It hurt them. It was part of this game. So that's something they're going to have to figure out. But bottom line is they had a chance to draft a stud receiver. They didn't do it, and I don't know how you fix that.
Let's take a question here from Christopher. Not a question once again, just a statement. Christopher says defensive coordinator Mike Pettin may be replaced next year. Hard to say, but he's not head coach Matt LaFleur's guy. The defense struggled to get after the quarterback today. Very few quarterback hits, very few sacks. The Packers' run defense couldn't seem to stop the Bucs' run game. The Packers' defense was struggling to tackle players. They weren't performing well in the red zone. I mean, the list just keeps growing and growing. The defense didn't do much well tonight. How concerned should Mike Pettin be about the status of his job?
Well, it's week 5. We'll see how the season ends, right? With that said, something's not adding up here because Mike Pettin is a darn good defensive coordinator. Point blank, period. He's a darn good defensive coordinator. The Packers have playmakers. They have talent on that defense. They've paid a lot of money for that talent. They've used a lot of high draft picks for that talent. Those are just those are 2 things you can accept. Mike Pettin has had a proven track record, and he's got players. The product should be better than this. I mean, something's off because what the production they put on the field should be better than what they've been putting on the field. So that's something to figure out long term and short term. In the short term, they've got to play better. Long term, you got to see where this thing is heading because if they turn it around, then this is a blip. But it's not adding up. And you go back to the beginning, Olivia, when Matt LaFleur was hired, the Packers brass really wanted Mike Pettin, and rightly so if you look at what he did in his first year as defense coordinator with Mike McCarthy. They really wanted Mike Pettin to stay here as defensive coordinator. That was important in the job search. Matt LaFleur had a connection with Mike Pettin because Kyle Shanahan, who was a Matt LaFleur friend and mentor, had been Mike Pettin's offensive coordinator in Cleveland for a season. So he had someone that he could get good intel from on Mike Pettin. I'm not saying that this was a completely forced marriage. However, it was not something that he never worked with Mike Pettin before, and it's not like he went out and hired Mike Pettin specifically for this job. So it's something to keep in mind for sure.
Thank you, Christopher, for your thought. Let's flip it over to Jordan for another thought. Jordan says, so, about cornerback Kevin King's contract, LOL. Let's talk about Kevin King. King was inactive tonight with a quad injury that he's been dealing with throughout the week, and he missed most of practice, was inactive tonight, and cornerback Josh Jackson got most of the snaps on the outside in his place. Jackson was called for defensive pass interference. He was in coverage for one of Brady's passing touchdowns. How sorely do the Packers need a healthy Kevin King now and going forward?
You know what the shame of it is for Josh Jackson, Olivia, is that he actually had quite a few good moments tonight. I mean, he made quite a few plays. The third and short tackle and getting in the backfield when you're chasing Chris Godwin in motion and you have the reaction to read it and get in the backfield. That was a good moment. He had some coverage strengths tonight, some coverage wins, and rightly so. That defensive pass interference when he just completely forgets to play the football, something that Josh Jackson was tremendous at in Iowa. I mean, that was his strength. That's what got him drafted. Despite the poor 40 time, it's like this guy plays the ball like a receiver. He's a playmaker. It was the opposite of that. You got to play the ball. And Josh Jackson was the first to tell you that. And you know the cameras picked up on a conversation in slow motion with Shannon Sullivan, and it looked like Shannon Sullivan was basically telling him as much after the play. He never turned around, and it's DB play 101 when you're down the field like that. So. My guess is that the Packers are going to try to pump Josh Jackson with positive reinforcement because there is actual evidence on the field that he had good plays. But the bottom line is that they need Kevin King, and this is why I've said all season that all the contract decisions that they've got coming up, David Bakhtiari, Aaron Jones, with their free agents, Kevin King can't be forgotten. Because the difference in having two good corners and having one good corner is a huge difference.
It's a 38-10 loss, perhaps. Thank you so much, Jordan, for pointing that out. Let's take a question here from Norman. Again, not a question, a thought. The Texans, the Vikings, and the 49ers are coming up. Even if the Packers drop one of those, 7-2 going into Week 11 feels great, especially with a stretch of the Jaguars, Colts, Bears, Eagles, and Lions coming up. Looking ahead at the Packers' schedule, including the Texans, who the Packers will take on the road this upcoming weekend, how does it look?
Fine. I look, this is a game where some shocking things happen that really turned the tide of this game. Unlike last year, you remember last year, the first game in San Francisco, 37-8. And the question going into the NFC title game was, is San Francisco actually 29 points better than this Packers team? And I think that we all kind of knew that wasn't a fluke. Like the 49ers handed the Packers their lunch pail in that first game. And sure enough, they proved that, yeah, they're 29 points better than the Packers last season. I get the totally opposite vibe from this game. I do not think that the Bucs are 28 points better than this Packers team. I think some really fluky, wonky, 2020 type stuff happened in this game that really changed the flow of this game. And the Packers, they handled it poorly. They handled the adversity poorly. Matt LaFleur kind of admitted that they didn't practice well this week. They came in feeling too good about themselves. Aaron Rodgers said they needed the kick in the booty, and they got it. Bottom line, the Bucs are not 28 points better than this Packers team. If they met a game at Rainbow Stadium, I don't think it goes this way. This is a Packers team I think is going to go into Houston next week, and with this wake-up call, I think they're going to win pretty handedly. They get the Vikings at home after that. The 49ers are banged up. Yeah, they could lose one of those games, but they could win all three too. And that's the reality for this team. This team it was a short list Super Bowl favorite coming in. It's a short list Super Bowl favorite coming out. That's not to say that there's not things that they need to fix. The defense has got to play better, right? They got to figure out how to cover tight ends. They got to be better against the run. They need some more explosion from the receiving core. And if that doesn't happen, that might not happen. But none of those things are reasons why they can't win the Super Bowl. They can still figure it out. And I don't long term. I don't see any difference with this team before or after what happened today.
Speaking of the defense needing to play better, Mark says the pass rush could be trusted last year. However, now this year it is spotty at best. Why? Why haven't outside linebackers Preston and Zadarius Smith, Rashawn Gary, why haven't they been hitting the quarterback nearly as much as they did last season?
It's Preston Smith is the big one because he's got a half sack, right? I mean, that's in 5 games. He had 4.5 sacks in his first 4 games last year. So if you look at Preston Smith's career, his sack production has ebbed and flowed. He's not, he had the 8 sack season, and the 4 sacks, and the 8.5, and the 4. It's kind of gone back and forth. And he had 12 last year. He's got to get more production as a pass rusher. I mean, I think that's the bottom line. Now he is dropping in coverage more. I think he'd be the first to tell you that, and when I asked him about it last week, he's still confident, believes that the sacks are coming, but it has been 5 games now, and it hasn't happened. So, yeah, they need to get more production getting after the quarterback. Doesn't have to be sacks. Outside linebackers coach Mike Smith will be the first to tell you that sacks are not the end-all be-all of pass rush, but they've got to affect the quarterback more. The difference in how uncomfortable Tom Brady was today compared to Aaron Rodgers was night and day, and they just didn't get after Brady. Aaron Rodgers was hounded for most of the game. They've got to get after the quarterback more and affect him more.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mark, for your question. Let's take another one here from Norman. Norman also is a harsh critic of defensive coordinator Mike Pettin for good reason tonight. Not a good performance from the defense overall. Norman says Pettin has his defensive backs play 15 yards softer than a teddy bear on 3rd and manageable. What an analogy. That will never make sense. What did you make of the way that Pettin had his defensive backs covering some of the receivers tonight against the Bucs?
Well, look, tonight it looked like they were without one of their top corners. When you move guys around, I think there's a tendency to be more cautious of the big play because one of your best guys isn't out there. That's not to say it's the right call, but you can understand it. So the other thing, too, covers look softer when you're not getting after the quarterback. And those two things are very much correlated to each other. The reality is that Tom Brady, he could do his taxes in the pocket today. I mean, he was very, very comfortable, and he had a lot of time. And you want tighter coverage. You want it to look like there's tighter coverage. Get after the quarterback more. So I think it's more about that correlation than now they're playing off coverage at all.
The Packers defense, I'm counting it up right here. It's had 4 quarterback hits tonight. The Bucs had about 12. I think that showed pretty clearly in what you saw tonight the game, and the Packers lost.
I'm terrible.
All right, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
I said I'm terrible at math, but that's triple, and it looks like they had triple the amount of pressure. Big difference. 12,
4. Yeah, good math. Good math. 4 times 3 is 12.
You know the numbers are hard to do sometimes.
You're making so much growth. I'm so proud of you, Ryan.
Thank you. I'll accept that.
Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us tonight. We really do appreciate it. We will be back later this week to get you geared up for the Packers' big game next weekend against the Houston Texans. Make sure you're checking out all of our coverage over on PackersNews.com. We have lots of post-game stories over there for you to enjoy. For Ryan, I'm Olivia. We'll see you next time.